The river was swollen from 3 days of relentless rain, its muddy current, roaring louder than the wind that bent the cottonwoods along the bank, and Eli Turner had never seen it this wild in all his 32 years of farming that stubborn strip of land near the Arizona territory's edge. He had gone out at dusk only to check whether the lower fence posts had held, cursing himself for waiting so late, when he heard a sound that did not belong to the river, a deep, broken gasp, followed by a cry that was almost swallowed by the water, and when he turned, heart hammering, he saw a figure being dragged sideways by the current, a woman's body fighting the river with terrifying strength, yet losing ground with every second, her dark hair plastered to her face, her arms thick and powerful as she clawed for purchase against slick rocks. And Eli froze for half a breath because she was unlike anyone he had ever seen, taller than most men he knew, even half-submerged, broad-shouldered, built like the river itself, unyielding, massive, alive. And then instinct overrode fear as he dropped his lantern and ran, boots skidding through mud as he shouted, though he knew she might not understand him, plunging into the icy water that stole his breath and tried to tear him from his feet. And when he reached her, he realized just how strong she was, because even drowning, she nearly dragged him under, her grip iron hard as panic flared in her dark eyes. And he had to shout again, gripping her wrist, forcing calm into his voice, grounding her just enough to let him hook an arm around her shoulders and pivot with the current instead of against it, letting the river spend its fury while he fought only to guide them both toward the narrow outcrop he knew lay downstream, his muscles screaming as the water slammed them against stone, skin-tearing, breath-burning, until at last his foot struck something solid and he hauled with everything left in him, collapsing with her onto the gravel bank where the river still tried to claim them, and for several long seconds neither moved except to cough and gasp. Rain mixing with river water, Eli certain he had just gambled his life on a stranger who could crush him, if she chose. Yet when she finally rolled onto her side and pushed herself upright, towering even as she knelt, she did not strike him or flee, but looked at him with a stare so steady and sharp it felt like being weighed, measured, remembered, and she spoke in a low, rough voice, accented but clear enough to understand, saying only one word, "Why?" And Eli, shivering uncontrollably, answered honestly because lies felt useless in that moment, telling her he couldn't watch someone die if he could stop it, and something flickered across her face then, something like surprise, like pain, like recognition, before she pressed a hand flat to her chest and gave a short nod, introducing herself as Ayanna, daughter of the Apache. And though Eli knew the stories people told, the fear, the warnings, the lies, none of them matched the woman before him who rose to her full height, easily a head taller than him, her presence commanding without effort, who swayed only once before steadying, wounded but unbroken, and Eli realized with a chill that rescuing her from the river might be the smallest part of what he had just done, because when he offered to help her walk, she allowed it, leaning only lightly on his shoulder despite the gash on her arm and the bruises darkening fast beneath her skin. And as they made their slow way toward his cabin, the storm easing into a heavy whisper, he noticed signs that set his nerves on edge, hoofprints pressed deep into the mud along the tree line, deliberate and many, not scattered like wild riders but ordered. And Ayanna noticed him noticing, her jaw tightening as she said her father would be searching, that the river had not taken her by chance but by necessity, because she had been tracking something dangerous near the water's edge when the bank gave way, and Eli felt the weight of her words settle into his bones when she added that her father was not a man who arrived quietly. And by the time they reached the cabin and Eli lit the fire, wrapping her arm and offering what little food he had, the air itself seemed to hum with anticipation, because somewhere beyond the trees, men were moving with purpose, and Ayanna sat across from him, firelight catching the scars that marked her arms and neck like chapters of a story written in survival, telling him that among her people, a life saved created a bond that could not be ignored, for good or for ill. And when Eli asked what that meant for him, she looked at him for a long moment before answering that her father would come, and when he did, he would bring judgment before he brought gratitude. And as the wind shifted, carrying with it the distant sound of horses and the low call of voices carried on the night, Eli understood that the rescue was over, but the consequence of that single choice was just beginning. And if you want to know what happens when Ayanna's father finally steps into the Firelight with an unexpected reward that no one, least of all Eli, could have imagined. Make sure you stay with this story and subscribe to the channel, because what follows will change everything.